Hello, everyone. The American Kyle the White works in a factory in Russia. He hopes to return to his homeland, but he faces a harsh reality. The blows of fate put obstacles in his path. In such a situation, it is almost impossible to survive, let alone remain true to oneself. But he must try. In the pouring rain, a masked giant fights his opponent. He lifts the man above his head and throws him down, celebrating victory. The guards rush toward him and drag him to the ground with a collar on a stick, like an animal. At the same time, another prisoner finishes a page in his journal, reflecting that the world is an extremely cruel place where everyone wears a different mask. Then, he attacks his sleeping cellmate, strangling him and pulling out his teeth with pliers. At dawn, the corpses are removed and thrown into an anonymous grave. The Krava prison is a tough place, and in a nearby town, an American, Kyle the White, works in a factory. He came here with his wife, who is not enjoying the long business trip. Gray would like to return home soon and go to the beach as he returns from his shift and calls his wife. She apologizes for being selfish, but her husband understands. The wife has absolutely no friends here. At that moment, the electricity in the house goes out, and a mysterious figure appears outside the window. The criminal sneaks inside while Gray searches for a way to turn the lights back on. She calls her husband again, but the villain attacks her and begins to beat her. When he hears the screams, he speeds up and calls the police, but they don't speak English. At that moment, the intruder pulls out a knife. Gray continues to fight desperately, and for that, she is stabbed. Her eyes go blank. The husband runs into the house, where he finds only the lifeless body of his wife. He covers Gray's body and cries when suddenly he is hit on the head with a vase. The bastard is still there and tries to escape, but he quickly regains his senses and rushes after him. He catches up to the tram and jumps inside. A fight ensues, where he disarms his opponent of his knife and throws him into the street, smashing through the window. He jumps after him, but he is hit by a motorcyclist. With a broken arm, he is arrested by the cops while the killer escapes. Later, they finally find the criminal, accusing him of murder. The judge reads the verdict. Acquitted due to lack of evidence. Kyle can't believe his ears, and his lawyer explains what is happening. In the end, the scoundrel provokes the American, and Kyle chases him. Afterward, the killer grabs a guard's weapon and shoots Kovic in the courtroom. For this, the man is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, as he will serve his sentence. In the prison known as Krava V, the old inmates observe the newcomers with great curiosity. They are particularly interested in Billy Cooper. The young American is only years old. The warden, Rutchov, welcomes the newcomers, demanding that a guy with a broken knee be brought before them. The prisoner tried to escape but was easily caught, and now his screams will serve as an example to others. Then everyone is brought inside and forced to undress. All personal belongings must be placed in a basket and handed over. Lieutenant Tolik notices Kyle's wedding ring and demands that he remove it. The American doesn't want to part with the only memento of his wife, and for that, he is beaten with a baton. Kyle falls and cries out in pain as Tolik forcibly removes the ring. The only thing he manages to keep is a small photo of Gray. Next, everyone's hair is cut to an acceptable length, and the prisoners wash. Then, a roll call takes place, as Kyle notices that Tolik has taken his ring for himself and is wearing it demonstratively on his finger. The guy suppresses his indignation and takes out the photo of Gray, remembering their carefree and happy days together, swimming in a pool under the hot Louisiana sun. It feels like it was just yesterday. Perhaps her death and this prison are just a bad dream. If so, this nightmare is only beginning. After the lights go out, Tony and his subordinates return to the cell and take Billy with them. Another prisoner, named Andre, also accompanies them. He has connections and influence in the prison, and for money, he can get anything he wants. This time, he needs a young man to have some private fun. Everyone hears screams coming from a nearby cell, but no one asks questions. A deafening siren marks the start of a new day. Kyle washes his face and steps out into the yard, shivering at the sight of Billy being beaten and humiliated. Andre sees him and provokes Kyle in the same way as his wife's killer. The American loses control of himself again and attacks the scoundrel. They fight, but Tonic quickly intervenes and pulls Kyle away. As punishment, he is thrown into an isolation cell with a faulty sewer system, the stinking mud directly on the floor, and traces of the previous visitor's blood on the wall. Now, Kyle's mind recalls the terrible memories of the day Gray was murdered. The man lies down on a stone bench and refuses to eat anything. He has lost everything, and his life is over. He decides not to prolong the senseless suffering and wraps a piece of clothing around his neck. When this method doesn't work, Kyle smashes his head against the wall. He begins to hallucinate, hearing Gray's cries of pain growing louder and louder. The man collapses, powerless. Suddenly, a moth flies out through the broken skylight as he remembers his wife asking him not to kill and to release the same insect that had entered their home. She told him a legend that people turn into moths when they die. Afterward, Gray lovingly places her hand on his heart. The man is distracted from his dreams, awakened by a cry of despair from the adjacent cell as he bangs on the wall of the fa. Poor guy. He understands perfectly. They are in a living hell. The guards arrive and leave the prisoner alone, a moth with its graceful wings. Escaping the darkness and desperate terror, it lands on the food plate again and again, as if inviting Kyle not to lose hope and to keep living. The prisoner decides that Gray is sending him a sign and picks up the spoon. Once his punishment is over, Kyle is transferred to a cell with a prisoner nicknamed Inmate. Tolik warns him that he has already killed several of his cellmates just in case, as he might want to change his place of residence. They can negotiate a deal, but the American doesn't want to play by others' rules yet, and he enters the cell. His neighbor doesn't say a word, continuing to write something in his journal. By the light of candles, the night passes without incident. In the morning, the prisoners are used to build a railway. During his lunch break, he almost faints from exhaustion. He is kicked awake and forced to continue working. A few days later, the brother of his late wife visits him and tells him that the woman was buried in her hometown. He advises Kyle to pay the guards, as it's the only way to survive here. The man seriously considers this suggestion. Later, in the prison yard, Andre tries to throw a ball at Kyle, but it hits the inmates of another way. The situation heats up, but Tolik intervenes and suggests they resolve the conflict at the Sparka, the local one-on-one fights. Kyle backs off and runs into Billy. The guy tells him that he was traveling through Russia by car and met a girl. They drank, and she crashed his car into a restaurant. The American was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison. They are joined by a man in a wheelchair named Malachi. He has read about Kyle in the newspaper and has a lot of respect for what he did. The man has been here for years and explains the local customs. Andre is a member of the Russian mafia, led by Bolt, who works with the guards. He essentially runs the entire prison. The other gangs avoid messing with them and they fight among themselves. Malachi says he will help the newcomers if there's trouble. He also advises Kyle to pay Tolik to get out of the dangerous cell. At night, Kyle has another nightmare about Gray's death. This time, he returns home in time, but a gate appears in front of him, preventing him from saving her. Helpless, he screams in his sleep, and Inmate grabs him by the throat. Kyle manages to defend himself, but the neighbor isn't trying to kill him. In fact, he's just teaching him a lesson on how to keep his voice down. Kyle, Malachi, and Billy sit at the same table during lunch. The boy with the shortest sentence advises him to keep his dead down to get out alive. Malachi, on the other hand, survives by selling illegal substances in the prison. Then, Andre approaches and spits in Kyle's food. Billy can't stand it and jumps on the scoundrel. He gets dragged away, and the thug threatens to meet him again. After sunset, during the walk, Kyle gives money to Tolik and asks to be moved, but the amount isn't enough. A music and dance show with men dressed as women is organized in the yard. It's a preparation for the fights. Today, Andre, the crowd's favorite, will compete. The administration and the prisoners place their bets, after which the fighter brutally massacres his opponent. He kicks the enemy while he's down, which is why the loser's gang rushes into the ring. The guards disperse the prisoners, and Kyle asks Malachi about it. What if his bald cellmate fights? The big guy has given up fighting in public. Long ago, General Rutchoff was unhappy, so they found another use for him. Now they use the guy to get rid of unwanted prisoners and to make money on cell exchanges. In the evening, Billy is taken to Andre again. Before that, the guy tries to sharpen a toothbrush to defend himself in the cell. He immediately pulls out his weapon, but Andre takes it away and stabs Billy in the side. Tolik hopes to make more money off the American and has him taken to the infirmary. The next day, Kyle is back working on the railway. A guy from the Russian gang kicks him for no reason, accusing him of being disrespectful. A guy asks what happened, but he sides with the gangsters when Kyle fights back, but the gangsters beat him up. Kyle ends up in the familiar punishment room, greeting his neighbor who is still behind the wall. It seems like they never let him out of there. Only dreams of Gray make Kyle briefly forget the horrible food and the uncomfortable stone bed. The days pass and blend into one. When he is visited, By the moth again, the man talks to it, which helps him pass the time. During a downpour, the cell floods through a crack in the ceiling. He hears the guards taking his neighbor to fight. Milosh, who is tall and weighs nearly kilos, is the one being taken. After a while, when he is finally released, he sees a mountain of food being delivered to his cellmate. The giant continues to mutter bitterly upon his return when he is noticed by Andre, who threatens him again. Then, a murder occurs in the yard, a clear message sent to the others. Business is business. In the evening, Kyle finds himself alone in his cell and decides to look at his cellmate's notes. He writes that hatred helps him replace hope and survive. With a displeased face, the neighbor appears in the doorway. They exchange glances, but Kyle remains unharmed. In the cafeteria, Andre picks on the American again, hinting that he wants to spend the night with Kyle. In response, the man stands up and punches him in the face. The other Russians rush in and start beating him, but Kyle doesn't give up and continues what he started. Tolik breaks up the fight again and takes the instigator to the punishment cell. Observing his neighbors suffering from afar, he knows that in despair, everyone turns to God sooner or later. This time, Kyle spends his time in isolation training. Meanwhile, an old mine is found on the railway. A car with guards accidentally rolls over it and explodes. Billy takes advantage of the situation and rushes into the field with his friend. The guards open fire on them, killing one of the guys. Billy continues his escape, crossing swamps and fields, but in the open spaces, he can't hide from the helicopter, and the guards catch up to him. Tolik beats the prisoner and accuses him of costing them a lot of money. He isn't sent to the punishment cell, as he is more useful as a toy for Andre. Meanwhile, Kyle continues to build his muscles. Even after returning to his cell, his neighbor realizes what's happening. The American has been pushed to his limits, and now he will fight to the end, but it will make him forget his past. He will become a cog in this inhumane machine. The prison administration sees Kyle's progress and gives him the opportunity to fight Andre in the Sparka. It's an offer he can't refuse. The big shots sip champagne, betting on a quick victory for the Russian. The fight begins. Kyle misses a few hits but quickly gets up and continues the fight. He lacks technique and experience, but he eventually knocks out his opponent with a powerful hook. Billy desperately cheers for his friend, who hits Andre again and again. In a rage, Andre jumps and sends Kyle to the ground, proceeding to beat him. The American struggles to recover, so his opponent taunts him. But at the last moment, Kyle manages to take Andre down and sinks his teeth into his neck. Ruthov orders the fight to stop, but it's too late. Andre bleeds out and dies. Kyle, in a fit of madness, lets out a victory cry. His cellmate isn't welcoming this new side of the man, warning that the thrill of victory will fade quickly. But Kyle continues to enter the arena, becoming the new favorite of the bets. The wardens of other prisons bring their fighters to compete. Killing his opponent has become a regular event for Kyle. The inmates are afraid to oppose him, and they rejoice in his victories. Malachi and Billy are also concerned about the cruelty they see in their friend. The cellmate asks Kyle if he realizes what he's becoming. The man has nothing to say. He doesn't care what people think of him. Soon, Gray's brother arrives from America again. He tries everything to get the man to return to his homeland, but Kyle no longer wants to. He asks not to give him false hope with empty promises and to forget his existence. Billy plans to escape during the celebrations of a national holiday. Kyle warns him of the consequences, but Billy can't take it anymore. Malachi helps him organize the escape. Then, a new inmate, Valya, comes to meet the local fight favorite. He clearly wants to avenge Andre, but Bolt stops him from acting recklessly. Meanwhile, Rutchov delivers a solemn speech. Billy tries to escape quietly, but he is spotted outside, and the guards take him away. Tolik, the lieutenant, beats him, saying the guy will never get out of prison and will continue to make money for him. We learn that Malachi betrayed his friend in exchange for medicine for himself. The betrayal is noted, and Billy is handed over to Valya so the man can torture him. The boy resists and spits in his face, fighting until the end. In the morning, he is found dead in a pool of blood. He is allowed to say a final goodbye to his friend. After these words, Billy dies. His body is buried in an anonymous grave, and his torment is over. Kyle's next fight is scheduled against Valya, who has been transferred from another prison for the big spectacle. But Kyle refuses to play their game anymore. He sits on the ground and refuses to fight. Valya beats him anyway, but the man's will can no longer be broken. Tolik takes the American away, promising severe punishment. He is handcuffed to a pole outside, where he spends day after day in the cold, heat, and hunger. The only way out is to give in and agree to enter the arena again. Meanwhile, Kyle buys kerosene from Malachi. He then pours it directly on the traitor and pulls out matches. The disabled man justifies his actions by saying he couldn't survive without the medicine, but it's no use. Malachi's body is engulfed, in flames. After taking revenge, Kyle remembers his childhood at school, where he was bullied because of his speech disorder. His teacher was the only one who supported the boy, and they became close. But then the man used the kid. For that, he too is consumed by the flames of betrayal and filth. Kyle is sent to the isolation cell, while the other prisoners are surprised by his determination. Some think he's an idiot, but eventually, all the small gangs decide to bury the hatchet for a common cause. They make peace with each other, and refuse to put their guys in the ring. Tolik demands that Bolt bring Valia. The guards no longer know what to do because they can't punish everyone at once. Kyle is visited by the moth again, and they see Gray's spirit in front of him. She didn't appear earlier because the man had lost his way for a while. Now he is back on the right path. Rutschov and Tolik try to solve the problem to keep making money. They decide not to kill Kyle because it would make him a hero in the eyes of the other prisoners. Instead, they will strip him of that status. The American is transferred to the infirmary where he sees Gray again. She is happy to have the old Kyle back with her. As soon as the man recovers, he is transferred back to the punishment cell. There, as usual, he greets his cellmate by knocking on the wall. But in the evening, the guards come for Kyle and take him to the main hallway of the prison. The prisoners watch through the bars as Rutschov speaks about the blatant disobedience within the walls of his institution. Kyle still has one fight left, and it will happen no matter what. Milosh is brought against him with a collar. The masked giant rushes forward and attacks the American. Kyle tries to escape, but the man's enormous hands grab him and start throwing him from side to side. The giant tries to strangle him, but Kyle hits the door of the nearest cell, and Milosh recognizes the familiar sound. He immediately lets go of Kyle and realizes it's his only friend. The giant can't speak, so he apologizes by patting his comrade's head. Tolik grabs his weapon and demands that the fight continue. Kyle declares that he is ready to die but will no longer bend. Milosh lunges at the guards, which is why he is shot multiple times. Kyle also joins the fight, cheered on by the other prisoners. Angry, they rip the doors off their hinges and start a riot. Kyle takes the hand of the dying Milosh. As he takes his last breath, the man covers the giant's body with his jacket as a sign of respect. Meanwhile, the prisoners break out but are met with gunfire and tear gas. Kyle finds a hiding place away from the carnage. He must escape this place. His cellmate offers his help. He returns to their cell, where he has a stash of files on all the crimes committed by the administration and the deaths of inmates over the past years. To escape, Kyle must agree to one more fight. After that, they will take him to a field to kill him. That's when he will have his chance. This man and Hagar died the night of the riot. For the next weeks, no one is allowed to leave their cell. General Rutschov approves the Americans' final fight. After that, they will no longer need him. Kyle enters the arena against Valia. The Russian giant brutally beats him, but Kyle lands a few hits in return. Despite the weight difference, Kyle locks the man in a painful hold and breaks his opponent's arm. Valia then pulls out a knife hidden in the sole of his shoe and tries to slash Kyle. But Kyle grabs his opponent's arm and directs it toward the stomach of Bolt, the Russian gangster. Bolt bleeds while Valia is knocked out by hitting his head on a pole. The guards take Kyle away while his cellmate quietly executes his plan. They sneak into the garage where they bring the American. They knock out the guards, and Kyle threatens Tolik with a weapon, forcing him to remove his handcuffs and return his wedding ring. Then, he drops a car on the scoundrel, taking his life. The cellmate escorts Kyle to the general's car and gives him a security guard's uniform. The man invites the cellmate to come with him. He hands over the documents to expose the horrors of Krava prison to the world. Kyle leaves successfully while the cellmate sneaks into the general's office with pliers in hand. Rutschov is killed by the prisoner, who knows all about his crimes. He doesn't resist arrest, and months later, the prison is shut down due to the documents Kyle made public. The film was shot in Bulgaria. The number of Lauren Taylor's character is a reference to Ray Bradbury's novel, Fahrenheit 451. In the late 1990s, Jean-Claude Van Damme's films began to struggle at the box office, and for the next few years they went straight to DVD, no longer appearing in theaters. This film is no exception and brought much more success to the actor. He starred in the sequel to Universal Soldier, then voiced Master Croc in the animated film Kung Fu Panda. A little later, he was invited to play the main villain in Sylvester Stallone's The Expendables.